this is every secret Minecraft feature you might have missed. And hey, YouTube bet me that you can't subscribe to the channel before I scroll to the 7th slot on my hotbar. So to prove them wrong, scroll your finger to that white sub button below. It's free and it helps out a ton. The Caves and Cliffs update is an update famous for having its features spread out amongst multiple updates. Well, some of those are still spread out and seem to be forgotten. I mean, where are bundles for one? The one that really got lost in the shuffle was the copper horn. See, originally added back in the 1.18 snapshot versions of Bedrock, they were ultimately removed before the 1.19 full version. And the reason given is that they just didn't satisfy the developers. So what did they do? Well, besides giving another use for copper, which is appreciated, they're meant to be more of an instrument that you could learn how to play, as opposed to the regular goat horns, which just played a preset sound. And while I think some players might have learned how to use this for some pretty great Minecraft remixes, it seems like Minecraft musicians are still limited to their note blocks. Parrots might seem like a cute mob, but they have a dark secret. And that secret is that, much like actual parrots, they're able to imitate different sounds. And unfortunately for you, if you were to keep a parrot as a pet, you might notice that they're able to imitate the sounds of hostile mobs. So that time that you heard a creeper when you were in the jungle and you couldn't find one around, that might have been the reason for it. But while that sounds like a downside, it actually could be an upside if you know what to look out for. Since by keeping a parrot on hand, then it'll start to imitate sounds of mobs that you might not have seen yet. So basically giving you an alert system for when there's hostiles nearby. Granted, the subtitles feature can also do this, but this is a lot cuter, so I'm inclined to use this if I can. There's no feature too weird to sneak past Phoenix SC, and this is in fact one of those examples. Since while you would probably never take a look at the top half of the bed like this, and after all, it doesn't place that way, and it very rarely spawns that way, and only if the world generation bugs out, then you could see that there's a hidden black dot that's tucked into the texture of every Minecraft bed. And while that alone is weird, what's even funnier is that if you were to look at this on the bug tracker when this is brought to light, Mojang's resolution is that they weren't even gonna fix it, which I've gotta say cracks me up. It seems like it'd be an easy fix, but I think even they know it's so circumstantial that what's the point of spending any amount of time to go in and fix it? I guess they're just waiting for the next texture update and they'll go in and fix everything. It's not worth doing it right now. Though if they ever want to do a beds and heads update, I think this would be a fun one to tuck in. At the very least, just to put it to bed. Okay, now I'm done. Phoenix SC also discovered this particularly weird sound that used to exist for Minecraft Steve. Now, the sounds for Steve have changed quite a bit, and while I've lamented the fact that he doesn't say oof anymore when he gets hurt, I'm particularly glad that this sound was left in the past, since there was an unused breathing sound for Steve that was in Minecraft's files at one point, and that's particularly creepy to listen to when you play it. This isn't the kind of ASMR that I'm looking for while I'm playing Minecraft. The block sounds are satisfying. Steve's blocked lungs, not as much. But for an April Fool's update, if they ever wanted to do this, I think that'd be kind of hilarious, if not at least very intimidating. And parrots don't just imitate the sounds of other mobs, they also imitate their path. And that'd be why a horde of parrots will follow other mobs around when they see them in the wild. And they'll even target individual mobs, so that where the mob goes, they follow. Which I guess given the fact that the monkey lost the China exclusive mob vote, this is basically the closest that we have to monkey see, monkey do. And hey, parrots are also in the jungle, so I guess that fits. Now, when you think of honey with beehives, we're usually taking it out of the beehive and then using it for our own devices. But if you were to craft it into a honey block and then place it next to a beehive, then you'll notice that the bees will fly towards the honey block and stick their face into it as if they're eating it, which I think is just adorable. If not a little gross when you consider that honey is actually bee barf, but hey, I'm not gonna yuck someone else's yum. I was weird enough for taking it in the first place. And if it means I'm able to return a little bit of the honey that they're giving us, then I'm happy to do it. I mean, it seems like they enjoy it, so I don't know why you would ever try this, but if you do, it's cute. Every time that you die in Minecraft, you're given a score, which seems kind of pointless considering that this isn't an arcade game, and the only scoreboard that's in the game is a command that's used to track other things, but what you'll notice is that that number is tied to the amount of experience that you have on death. And so if we were to die with over 21,863 levels, then the score that you get is actually negative. And the reason being is that we're going over the integer limit for this number. It doesn't know what to display, it gives us a negative, which is kind of funny. The game's basically calling you out for being a tryhard, which yeah, if you have 21,864 levels, you probably deserve a little bit of call out. But it is also funny to me that even with all those levels, if you went to go add all these things together in an anvil, it would still tell you it's too expensive. That's a rant for another day, but it still annoys me. Did you know that within the game's code, these little flowing pockets of water inside of caves actually have a name? Yeah, I wouldn't have looked for it either, but apparently they're called springs. So, cool. Nowadays, we're used to getting Minecraft snapshots on Wednesdays, but in the past, Friday was actually more associated with updates. And that's because in the early days of Minecraft, Minecraft, the game's creator Notch would release secret updates on Fridays, calling it Secret Update Fridays. And some notable features that were added in this way were the minecart and rails, dungeons and spawners, redstone as an entire concept, boats, sugarcane, chickens, jukeboxes, spider jockeys, crouching, paintings, fishing rod. There was quite a bit that was an early alpha that came from this way. And I'll be honest, I kinda love the idea of doing this, but it was later discontinued for the Halloween update. Since Notch would go on to tweet on October 7th of 2010 that they were postponed until they know what to do with them. And given the fact that there was nothing else that happened with these ever, I'd say that it's probably safe to say they don't know what to do with them. And really, the last thing that was ever said on the topic was, I liked the Friday updates, but Saturday fixes suck. And that much I have to agree with. One of the oldest versions of an item elevator in Minecraft actually had to do with glass blocks. And that's because the way that Minecraft items interacted with transparent blocks is that if you dispense something vertically into a stack of glass blocks, then it would actually get transported up into the top, where you then divert it into an item stream and get it over to whatever hopper system you would use. It was pretty cool. However, when water elevators were introduced in the form of bubbles, using soul sand, then this was no longer needed and it was discontinued. And while the bubble system's a lot more intuitive, it also was a lot easier to just carry around glass and do it this way than having to build a whole water tunnel full of source blocks to do it in the recent updates. It's hard for me to say that I don't miss the old version sometimes. Here's how you're able to make infinitely wireless redstone using just an iron and a diamond pickaxe. Now, as this exploit is demonstrated by user Jerry Lum, you can see that what we have to do first is place down a cobblestone block here in front of the piston, and then start breaking it with our iron pickaxe. Then, once we've done that, we're going to push it out of the way using the piston, and instead place an obsidian in its place. And now, this gets a little weird, but you have to start breaking the obsidian with the iron pickaxe enough to see the block break animation. Once you do, switch over to a non-pickaxe slot in your hotbar, and at that point, the game knows that the obsidian's supposed to break, but it won't actually break until we switch over to that diamond pickaxe. And folks, that's basically your recall button at this point. As long as you don't switch over to that diamond pickaxe, you're not going to trigger this obsidian. Now, yes, because we're using obsidian to set this up, it will take a long time to set up too. I mean, 5-minute timer is going to be pretty rough. But being able to sync up one of these with your Ender Pearl stasis chamber means that anywhere in your world, we can basically press a button to teleport ourselves right back to the spot, which is really so cool. Or you could set it up with a nether portal as they do in this example, and turn it off when you're getting chased in a manhunt. I mean, as long as you have a block update detector like this, it's a fully wireless universal remote. And at that point, it's really just the limits of your imagination. Go wild. Now, when you see a hostile mob spawn in a village, you're probably not paying much attention to your villagers. I mean, after all, you want to deal with the threat. However, if you take a close look, you can actually notice that when villagers are nervous, they'll begin sweating and emit water particles above their head, which I think is a really cute detail. If anything, it's just a smart way to reuse this particle effect in a different way. But it might be hard to get a villager stuck in one place long enough to see this, because also when villagers get scared of a zombie, they'll start running even faster than the player can at max speed. Yeah, they get a little scared and that's all the inspiration they need. It's never worked for me. I get scared in a chase scene, I'm lying down dead. I'd rather go out in peace. Ever wondered how much damage you deal to a mob? Well, surely some of you must, because there's so many mods out there that exist to show you a mob's health bar. But really, you can see this within the game as well, because when you attack a mob and they display the heart particles, if you actually took the time to count those, you notice that they're not just for show. They actually display the exact amount of damage that you dealt to the mob. Now, granted, they show up pretty quick and they sometimes overlap, but sure enough, if you deal 5 hearts of damage, you're gonna see 5 hearts pop up above that mob's head, which is a pretty cool effect, but even knowing this, I doubt I'm ever gonna take the time to count it. I'll know how much damage I've dealt to a mob when they die. If it's not enough to kill them, then it's not enough for me. If you were to build an end portal with the east and west blocks facing inward, like so, and then the north and south frames facing outward, then you'll realize that the portal will actually spawn outside of the end portal frame when you put in all the Eyes of Ender. And to me, it's just so funny that these blocks have any kind of directionality anyway. I mean, I've known plenty players who have tried to build one of these in creative mode, only to be disappointed as to why it didn't work. But then this works? It's just too weird for me. When you come across an igloo, you're not really seeing many villagers. However, they're still classified as a village. And so if you were to have the bad omen effect and then start to climb down the hatch inside of an igloo, you could actually start a raid, which is a pretty raw deal for you and that villager that's stuck down there. I mean, having to be trapped next to a zombie villager is bad enough, but then to know that all you have to look forward to when you escape from that prison is a whole bunch of pillagers up top, yeah, I can't say I'd be excited about leaving either. If you've ever messed around with the spectator mode, you've likely noticed that by interacting with a mob, you can see through its perspective. And while this offers some fun gags, like the creeper's green tint or the spider's kaleidoscope vision, there's one you might not consider to try. But while it might seem silly, it is entirely possible to spectate an item frame just like the others. And why this happens is probably as simple as that it's an entity like the others, but since we can't do the same for item drops on the floor, I just figured it wouldn't work out. But hey, it does, and I guess we'll still have an inventory slot to boot. If you're like me, you love the soul speed enchantment, but the look of soul soul soil just really isn't doing it for your base. In that case, no worries, because even if you put carpet down or slabs on top of the other block, you're still able to get the full effect of soul speed, meaning you can run around with style and speed without having to look at all the brownie black in the floor, to use the technical term, proving that this might just be the way to get the full mileage out of the enchantment without having to give up your floor's facade. Crawling really isn't meant to be a fast activity, but through the help of certain enchantments and effects, you're able to turn this into one of the fastest modes to travel in the game. By combining Depth Strider, Soul Speed, Dolphin's Grace, and Speed 2 all into one package, it's entirely possible for a player to travel hundreds of thousands of blocks with ease. And while I thought this was patched out back in the snapshots of 1.16, as it turns out, in recent versions, if you have enough willpower, you're able to get just that same speed matched. And if your computer can handle it, it's certainly a sight to see. If you don't yet have the Mending enchantment, you'll want to pay attention to this, because when you take those non-enchanted items and mix them together like this, it's not just the two durabilities that add up, but rather that repaired item will have the sum of the two items' durability plus an additional bonus of 5%. And hey, you did all of that without consuming any XP, which I again think is pretty useful. So if you're getting a lot of armor drops from your mob farm, this could be a good way to bring them back up to usefulness, since even if these two items wouldn't add up to a full durability item, with that 5% repair bonus, it goes right up to clean and pristine. All of which without ever having to touch an anvil. Skulk sensors are very useful, but they're also very noticeable. But if you want to keep their function while losing that fidelity, then it's worth noting that by waterlogging a skulk sensor, then they'll be silent, but still behave normally. Now granted, this doesn't make them entirely discreet since the sound waves are still visible, but as we can verify from the Minecraft subtitles, there's no sound that's given off from the skulk sensor itself when we do this. But when you're trying to use a skulk sensor for a hidden trap like this, then anything you can do to make it less noticeable is gonna go a long way. After all, it just takes one little detail for them to notice and the whole operation to go belly up. And for the price of a water bucket, I'd rather stack those odds in our favor. Plenty of players in Minecraft want minimap markers. I mean, that's definitely the reason it's in every Minecraft mod pack I've ever seen. But a feature that passed most people by is that by right-clicking on a banner, you're able to add it onto the map and show exactly where it is, which can create some really interesting and detailed maps if you want, especially when zoomed out. Better yet, throw a name on that banner, and then as soon as you right-click on it, you'll actually see that custom name on the map. So if you're trying to find home, you don't have to wonder where it is. Just look on it and, oh, there it is, home. Normally, wandering traders seem pretty useless, and oftentimes they're not worth keeping around for the trades. But if you're gonna get rid of them for loitering, keep this in mind first. See, while we usually kill these guys and their llamas for a new set of leads, that's not where the free stuff ends. But rather, if you were to get the jump on a wandering trader while they're drinking their invisibility potion at night, then you'll actually drop the potion as an item, which isn't the most ethical, but it certainly does work. So if you're trying to save your golden carrots, at least you know you can trade a life instead of your nuggets. When Minecraft added in the new stone blocks, it added so much more variety to our builds. And I've personally gotten a lot of use out of andesite since it got added in. But for some reason, I never seem to have enough after a mining trip. So luckily, if you also run into that problem, it's actually possible to craft andesite using diorite and cobblestone. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but sure enough, if you put them into the crafting grid, you're able to get some fresh andesite out of those two other blocks. And I guess that means you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I'm still personally not a fan of diorite. So for its case, I'm glad it has a use now. If you have trouble fighting mobs at night, then you might want to brew up some weakness potions. Since surprisingly so, these can render a lot of mobs completely useless. And you'll see as much if we use it on a zombie. They will still do their attack animation, however, you don't even receive a damage tick or a knockback when they do it. And folks, that's on hard difficulties. And it's not just zombies either. This will happen for slimes, spiders, and even silverfish. And perhaps my favorite yet, if you use a weakness potion on a cave spider, that'll prevent it from poisoning you too, which really makes these ankle biters seem a lot less intimidating when you use it like that. If you're trying to defend your local village, then the doors are the first thing you gotta watch. But if you're not looking to spend all the materials on ironclad doors to protect them, then don't worry, there's a way simpler option. Sure enough, all you gotta do is just invert the door and all of a sudden, the zombie doesn't know what to do with it. An easy way to check if a zombie can break in is by hitting F3, looking at the door, and seeing if it says open true. But as you can see with the inverted ones, you don't see that same tag. Meaning if you want to keep the villagers safe, you just gotta look at it from an opposite point of view. Literally. Getting the full effect from a splash potion more often than not seems like a fantasy and not so much a reality. But as it turns out, to bring this promise into the present, all you have to do is look straight up and land a splash potion square on your noggin. By doing that, you hit the sweet spot right on your character's hitbox, and that'll help you sport the splash potion effect as advertised. Better yet, it also works with dispensers, meaning you can set up the proper potion systems to give you the full effect each time, which will have your friends wondering why your speed system works so much better than theirs. Most of the time, locking a chest in Minecraft is a luxury that only creative map makers have. That is, until you add our furry friends into the equation. By having your cat sit on top of a chest, it is impossible to open up the thing. And what's even better is that you can kinda hide this system by having a piston push a non-solid block on top of the chest. That way, if your friend's trying to open up your chest to steal your valuables, at least your feline companion's gonna keep it safe. They're not exactly ferocious lions by appearance, but sure enough, they still can do the job just alright. Dogs are a great asset to have in your Minecraft world. If anything, it's just nice to have a companion while you explore. But all that upside can come crashing down if the little guy bites the dust. So to keep that man's best friend on the up and up, it's worth taking notice of its tail. See, the way that it's coated, the lower the wolf's tail goes, the less health that it has. Meaning, if you see it like this, it's worth passing them a steak or something to heal them up. And as an added bonus, this also means that we can rotate their tail like so if we increase the health too. Weird, huh? For the building community, copper is one of the most exciting blocks that's been added in a while. But with all those different weathered and oxidized variants, it begs the question, what's the best way to get them? Well, thanks to this user, this format seems to be the solution. Here, we not only get a space-efficient layout, but we also get to see something that holds up to the mechanics. Because, you see, copper oxidizes faster with a 4-block gap in between, so this takes that into account for the best solution. And as soon as you have the landmarks set for where to place each block, this should be a big help for getting that Statue of Liberty up and running. Activating a regeneration beacon in your world is a huge flex. But did you know that you can actually get more out of it if you deactivate it? Seriously, because of a bug that prevents the beacons from giving the full speed regen, it's actually faster to regenerate your health by turning on and back off the beacon. While a normal beacon can take you from 1 HP up to the full 20 in 1 minute and 12 seconds, a modified beacon can do the same in about 51. Which I think I'm right in saying is downright stupid. But until Mojang assesses this bug, this is definitely the way to handle it. Planting crops in Minecraft seems like a fairly easy concept. I mean, you take seeds, you put it into the dirt right next to water, and you're probably good. But even then, according to Minecraft's code, there is still a proper way to grow your crops. For some reason, Minecraft crops actually do grow faster when they're placed in a row. So if you want to get more bang for your buckwheat, you gotta place those suckers into a straight line. Now, I have no idea why this happens, and clearly I have no farm experience in real life to know if it's real. But hey, at least going forward, you know the proper way to get your carrots in a line. Now, it's commonplace knowledge by this point, you don't place a bed in the nether. I mean, that's just intentional game design. But then it might be a surprise to see this not explode in the end. See, what's happening here is that in Bedrock, it's actually possible to disable this intentional feature through a hidden command. And now in 1.18, we can keep our beds safe by changing the game rule respawn blocks explode to false. And then whether we're interacting with the bed in the nether or respawn anchor in the overworld, neither will explode anymore. And even though we still can't sleep in them even with this changed, at least the villagers can. You wanna know the fastest way to trade in Minecraft? And I'll give you a hint, it doesn't use any kind of big system like this, but rather the most useful tidbit that you can know just relies on the spacebar. The way you do it is simple. You click on the trade you want to do, you click the item, and then you hit spacebar to refill the commodities that the villager wants. And just like that, repeating a cycle of going spacebar click, we can completely trade through the villager's options before it needs to restock. And while this gets particularly helpful if you're trying to batch a lot of trades with something like a Fletcher, if you have villagers existing in your world from older versions, then they might be bugged in a way where they can trade infinitely. And then when you use this trick, you're pretty much set for life. So if you got the key on your keyboard, you might as well use it. Unless you're a rabbit, foxes in Minecraft seem pretty adorable. But that's only because you haven't seen them at full force yet. Sure enough, it's entirely possible for the fox to hold a sword in its mouth and completely use it. And while this not only makes for a really solid Zashian cosplay, it can also be really beneficial because you can use the fox with a fire aspect sword to make cooked chicken farms. Truly, you can't judge a book by its cover, so if you see one of these holding a sword, you might want to back away, or at the very least, keep your chickens in the coop. Snow golems melt in the desert. That's not much of a surprise, even Frosty the Snowman could have told you that. But what you might be surprised to know is that if you use a fire resistance potion, that'll allow your snow golems to survive in hot climates. And yes, that even includes the nether, as silly as it might seem. So if you have a couple of these lying around after a piglin bartering, you could set up a couple of snow golems, splash them with this, and use those to help you eviscerate through that blaze spawner. Just get ready for the rude awakening when the potion effect wears off, and you're left with nothing more than a pile of snowballs in front of you. I guess nothing good ever lasts, huh? Bubble elevators are great, but they're not always a joy to build. I mean, having to place the full water source blocks all the way up is a pain in the brain. So to save that hassle, you can instead place one water source block at the top and then use kelp of all things to turn the rest of them into water source blocks. After destroying the kelp and placing a soul sand on the bottom, just like that, you got a perfectly functioning bubble elevator without all the tedium of heading to the nearby lake to fuel it up. And hey, you even get to keep the kelp for more elevators in the future. It's a win-win. One of the key properties of Minecraft's water is that this stuff gets everywhere, and examples like this show as much. So to stop that, we usually use signs like so to cut off the source, which works for sure, but it's a bit obtrusive, to say the least. So to keep it simple and out of sight, glow lichen is a solid pick. See, besides just lighting up your stuff, this organism is good for blocking flowing water, letting us walk into our water base without a problem, or a distracting piece of wood on the side. And if you ask me, that's the best of both worlds, even if it's not the intended use. Here's how to turn your allays into a deadly weapon, since even though they can't equip it, if you give them a piece of Thorn's armor to hold onto, then any mobs that try to attack them will also take damage from that. And as you can see in this example from Ray's-works, if you tie your allay to a lead and then have a mob attack you, you might just have yourself the deadliest balloon in Minecraft. But if you do want to try this out, I have to give one warning, which is that even though the allays tend to regenerate a lot of health, there are still a few mobs that can kill them off. So to keep them safe and on your side, you might want to have a couple of allays doing this, that way the damage is getting evenly dispersed amongst the crowd. And if you really need to keep your allays from dying, then your real get out of jail free card here is that if you give your allay a totem of undying, then they can use it just like we would. And there you go, you take them from hardcore mode right back into regular survival. Or if the allay's not the only mob they want to keep safe, then with the fox as well, you can do the same. But unfortunately, they're a little bit tougher to get the totem too, since for the fox you need to throw the totem onto the ground for it to be picked up. But once they have it, it doesn't matter what kind of polar bear gets nearby. They'll be left unscathed, and you'll have a very confused polar bear as well. If you're tired of placing pumpkins, then don't worry, dispensers will do it for you. The reason this works is based off a snow golem trick. But instead of having the pumpkin set up on top of 2 snow blocks, you have those 2 snow blocks a little further off where it actually can't build a golem. There are plenty of different directions and configurations where this can work, but as soon as you find one, then it's entirely possible to get your pumpkins placed without having to do the right clicking yourself. Is there any point to it? Not that I can think of. And honestly, it's probably a smarter option to have this do the intended method of actually having auto golems built. I'm gonna come out and say it, silverfish are a real pain. A bold statement, I know. So if you're like me and you're trying to avoid being ambushed yet again while finding the end portal, then a Silk Touch tool is a good pick to have. See, if you have a tool enchanted with Silk Touch that isn't a pickaxe, then we can use that as a dowsing machine to see where any potential infested blocks happen to be. And hey, it'll even let us pick them up for later use, whatever you choose that to be. And while I shouldn't directly advocate for it, I do think it'd make for quite the prank, just saying. While logs and leaf blocks might seem pretty primitive, they're actually fully capable of transmitting redstone signals. You see, when you have a leaf block, it has a tag in its data that remembers just how far away it is from the nearest log. And while this is meant to determine when the leaves should decay, it actually still exists when the leaves are placed by the player. And when that distance tag gets updated, it can actually get detected by an observer. By adding a log into the proximity of leaves in an area, you can send a wave effect of redstone transmitting through observers and leaves. And if you got a love for the technical side of Minecraft, then you can definitely see how this could be applied. Let's say you need to move your pet dog, but you don't want to risk it dying while you're running across the treacherous landscape. Well, no worries, Ray's-works has you covered. Since by attaching your pet to a lead and then that lead to a fence post, we can use a piston like this so that when the item despawns, then your pet will suddenly teleport that long distance just like that. And through the help of a chunk loader like this one, we can make sure that this design never unloads. That way, with whatever timer you build, it's gonna work just fine. And most importantly, it means your feline friend can travel thousands of blocks, all without having to move a muscle. Can't say I'm not a little bit jealous. Having a conduit in your ocean is a big flex, so having several of them should make for a big showcase. But after you spent all that time rounding up the prismarine hearts of the sea, it begs the question, do you know the best way to use them? Well, as it turns out, there is a right answer. See, since these conduits give out their effects in such a pattern, the most efficient way to get the full effects wherever you go is by placing the circles in an overlapping fashion like so. And this chart from BlockFacts really clears that up. And that'll help you feel like a proper Atlantean anywhere throughout your base. To most people in Minecraft, the signs seem pretty limited. I mean, save for the different colored dyes and wood types, how much else can you really do? Well, as it turns out, through the help of Unicode characters, there's actually quite a lot that you can add to these little things. And since these characters and emojis aren't exactly obvious to use, they can add some really fun diversity to your maps. I mean, if anything, it's just so that I don't have to look at another arrow that looks like this, but instead this. It's just so much nicer. If you need to quickly get rid of some fire in the nether, then a good way to do that is by brewing up a couple of splash water bottles. Since these not only extinguish ourselves when we catch on fire, but they can also clear this plus sign shape out of the fire that catches on the ground. So if you need to make sure that your items don't burn, it might help to throw down one of these. That way, even if you burn alive, at least your stuff won't. The word waterlogging doesn't exactly sound like speed. which is why it's even weirder that if you submerge a ladder, it's actually faster than a normal ladder. Sure enough, if you get the rungs of a ladder wet with a bit of water, you can actually sail up them in speeds that put the regular ladders to shame. My guess is that this is some form of combination of swimming and climbing, but I don't know, it still doesn't make any sense to me. But hey, if you're trying to make your non-cake ladders seem a little faster, then this is definitely the way to beef them up, and at least add some form of speed back into the equation. Magma blocks sound like a real force to be reckoned with, but as it turns out, they've got one crucial flaw. For all the fear that the name gives off, as it turns out, if you step onto a magma block and then just hit the shift key, all of a sudden, you're immune to damage. For some reason, all it takes is getting into a squat formation to save yourself from burning. Who knew? And honestly, I'm kinda sad that the same doesn't work in lava. Really, every time I see this, I think it's a bug, but sure enough, until it gets patched out, it's a feature, ladies and gentlemen. And it's one that I think you should definitely take advantage of. Secret entrances in Minecraft are very cool to pull off, but most of the time, with redstone and such, they take a lot of work. So for a simpler option, you can build one using just this one block. Seriously, if you place down a shulker box with a block above your head, you can actually phase through the shulker box when you open it up to get sneakily into your base. To any onlookers, it looks like you just fell through solid ground, which I guess you did, making this even cooler. And it's definitely the new way I'm getting into my mines. If you're looking for the fastest way to mine in Minecraft, then you're gonna need this on your leggings. Since even though dive mining's become less popular since its inclusion, with the addition of the Swift Sneak enchantment, now it's worth doing again, because the name's misleading. It doesn't just give you a swift sneak, but also gives you a swift crawl. And with Swift Sneak 3 on our leggings, we can get some real speed while we're mining in a 1 block tall tunnel. So as long as you don't have claustrophobia, it's worth adding to your to-do list. At the very least, it gives you a reason to go down to the ancient cities, because if we're being honest, the recovery compass isn't worth it. If you take the time to study a soul sand block, you'll notice that it's not a full block. Rather, it's just a hair short of being a full block size. And while most of the time that's imperceptible, when you use a minecart, it gets immediately noticeable. The reason being is that if you partner these two concepts together, you'll notice that it's possible to phase through solid ground. What happens is that if you have a rail placed beneath a soul sand and then a minecart rolls on top of the stack, the cart will snap down to the rail below and phase you through the soul sand. So if you want to add this to your roller coasters, I guess why not? You can't see it, but there's a hidden ladder here, and it's not one that we made with sticks, but rather with the way that vines and maps overlap, we can mix together an item frame and a map to make our vines completely invisible and the map climbable, which could make it easier to do something like building out your large map on a wall, or better yet, for a hidden entrance. And you don't even have to go that far. You want a reason to do this? Now none of your friends can rotate that map art to make it look bad, since the vine's hitbox is slightly larger than the item frames. And when you got destructive friends like me, that's worth the price of admission on its own right. Saplings, like many other things in Minecraft, age on a system called random tick. And since we're able to detect when those saplings are aging, it means that saplings can technically give random redstone signals. So if you're trying to add random outputs into your Minecraft redstone circuit, this is a way to do it. And if you want a higher frequency of random outputs, just put down more saplings. For a pretty bare bones concept, you're able to get a surprising amount of power out of one of these. And in the end, who would have thought that a little bundle of leaves and sticks would be as powerful as this whole circuit? The pillager mob definitely has a problem with anger management, but if you're trying to impress your friends as the master pacifist, then you should know that it's actually possible to take one of these monsters and bring it over to the good side. You see, just as crossbows work for us, they can actually have their crossbows break, meaning that if you bait them out of enough shots, they'll eventually be left with no weapon in sight. And at that point, they might still seem a little grumpy, but sure enough, they're pacified. And while I wouldn't feel comfortable reuniting them with society just yet, with progress like this, it's definitely a step in the right direction. If you're building your mob farm without an armor stand, then you're doing it wrong. Since strange as it may sound, having an armor stand set up like this in the middle of your mob farm makes it so that when you use a sweeping edge sword, you don't have to worry about wasting one of your swings on dying mobs. Since anytime that you attack a mob with sweeping edge and it dies on the spot, then it just absorbs the attack without doing anything else. But attacking an armor stand alleviates this, and that gives us the best option for crowd control. And it also means that if you're swiping at the armor stand, you're not going to take any thorns damage from any mobs that happen to spawn with it. So if all it costs is a training dummy to help you deal with these other dummies, then that's something I'm willing to take. We can make this TNT launcher over 3 times better with just this simple trick. See, the problem is that because of the damage that you take in survival survival mode, we never seem to launch as high as we do in creative. But this user has a perfect solution, since by simply attaching a dispenser full of arrows to shoot us before we launch off, then that little tick of damage is going to make sure that we launch sky high off of one of these things. And if you don't believe me, just look at the comparison. It's pretty jarring. But with either method, it's important to remember. It's great that we have a way to launch ourselves into the air, but you're going to need some way to safely land on the ground. Otherwise, it's a lot less impressive. I don't know about you, but sea pickles don't get a lot of use in my Minecraft world. That is, until I found out that they're surprisingly helpful with storage of all things. By placing 2 waterlogged pickles into your item stream, you're able to redirect the flow of items for sorting without running into issues like bottlenecking. That means these things are extremely useful for storing items into hoppers that come from 2 different opposite water streams. And since the flow of the system doesn't disrupt, you can still get the good speed that comes from one of these machines. So even though I have no clue how this got figured out, it's still going to do wonders for your item sorting system. Now, this won't be a surprise, but an exploding creeper is not a welcome sight. Though, when you're at this point and the monster's already primed, how do we deal with it? Well, it might seem pointless, but the solution actually hinges around placing a block between your feet and the creepers, since the way that Minecraft calculates explosion damage is based off a ray cast between the source and the bottom of the player's hitbox. Meaning if we have a block to, well, block the oncoming damage, that will keep us virtually unscathed by the blow. And in my eyes, that's not too shabby for just a measly piece of cobblestone. If we power this block with redstone, then this big drip leaf plant will never fall, which is admittedly very weird. It's what they're supposed to do. But sure enough, no matter how long we stand here, it'll never droop down. And interestingly so, if the big drip leaf was already drooping down, then by powering them on, they'll instantly go up to the locked position. And while this feature seems confusing, it's definitely intentional, given the fact that the drip leaf plant was included within the new redstone creative tab. And while it definitely looks out of place there, this does give us some cool new options of using this as a new kind of trapped door. Almost like a timed trap door, if you will. You wait for the mob to fall, and then bam, lock it right up to the upright position. And I know for one that there's technical geniuses in the Minecraft community who can think of things way better than I could with this. So we'll leave it to them to see how cool it can be. Fire makes for a great decoration in your builds, but fire spread could also ruin your builds. So how do you find a happy medium? Well, the answer comes with Soulfire. Since with this, even if fire tick is enabled, it doesn't matter, because Soulfire will never spread. And while you do obviously change out the color for this example, that's a small sacrifice for keeping the rest of your base safe. And come on, it's not like the blue fire looks terrible anyway. I really think that we're making an improvement on both fronts. And at the very least, you can build that new fireplace in your house without having to tear your hair out. Now, I know that composters don't seem like the most helpful of items, but that might just be because you're using it wrong. Since what you need to understand is that the first item that you put into the composter is always guaranteed to fill up the first level. And that's regardless of the item that you're composting. So if you want the maximum efficiency when you're using your composter for bone meal, first put in an item with a low chance of composting for the first stage, and then use higher chance items like pumpkin pie for the rest of the way. That way, you're saving these higher chance items for where they're actually useful, which might not make composters the most useful block yet, but even if they're not useful, at least you know how to use them now. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?